Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this second episode of Season 3 of Raising the Roof. I'm Nick Atkin, and you're listening to the podcast that brings together business leaders and industry experts to unpick the hot topics both in housing and much further beyond. And today I'm well chuffed, good Yorkshire phrase, to be joined by Yorkshire Housing's very own Homes and Environment champion, Steve Mackenzie. Steve has been one of our customers here at Yorkshire Housing for just over 7 years, but more importantly, he is a member of our Customer Voice and Review Committee, which does an absolutely fantastic job of making sure the views of our customers are heard and also acted upon. As you're about to find out, he's extremely passionate and knowledgeable about all things sustainability. I learn huge amounts from Steve. And so much so that he became a member of our customer committee out of his dogged determination to see more people enjoy safe, healthy, but also energy efficient homes. Many of you listening may also have seen Steve treading the conference stage boards as he's a regular keynote speaker at numerous industry events, as well as a really keen campaigner for greater customer engagement. So, thanks, Steve, for joining me today. Great to have you with us in God's own country.
Thanks, Nick. Nice to be here.
And as you could tell, Steve is an adopted Yorkshire person, but you'll get more about that probably later. Steve, let me kick things off. As landlords, we've got a really clear responsibility to make our homes more energy efficient, but almost also importantly within that, to cut the bills for customers who are living in those homes, whilst at the same time tackling climate change. But we know there are some huge challenges around getting this work done. As in many cases, it's a really hard sell for us to be able to do this work in customers' homes. I bigged you up as our energy expert, but more importantly, you really understand how we engage with customers more effectively to sell this message. So what needs to change? What do landlords need to think about to get their retrofit projects and their energy efficiency projects up and running?
Thanks. I wouldn't consider myself an expert. I just listen to people and read a lot of reports. There's a lot going on at the moment. A lot of residents, they're stuck with the cost of living as it is at the moment.
Yeah.
Retrofit, net zero, climate change, call it whatever you like. We got a target of 2050. That's 26 years away. And I don't think people have actually grasped how important it is. It's nothing for them to worry about today. Put it that way. The cost of living crisis and everything else is their main concern, which I appreciate. There's also a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of negative media and a lot of people listening to people who don't know what they're talking about, even though they say they do. I'll give you an example. At a recent open day at Duggleby, there was one lady there, spoke to the chap from the heat pump suppliers or manufacturers, and she said that somebody had told her that during the winter, if her dog walks in front of the heat pump, it will freeze. Now, that's one of the extreme ones. But, I mean, these are the sorts of things that people are listening to and they're believing.
Yeah.
And I don't think the sector nor the government are doing enough to counteract these negative stories.
Right.
Again, the national media, you could have 100 stories around retrofit, 99 brilliant jobs, well done. One bad case, what is it they focus on?
Yeah.
What is it people read? What is it people believe? The other thing I think is that there is not enough advertising from the government or the housing sector. And it's not just landlords, it's suppliers, it's trainers, manufacturers. The whole sector needs to get out and talk to the public.
Right.
In one respect, I feel sorry for the landlords and the housing sector because it seems as if several years ago, the government said, right, social housing landlords, here's 3.8 billion. Go out and retrofit your homes, and that's it. And they left you to it.
Yeah.
No guidance, no advice, no this is the way to go or anything like that. So every landlord has had to learn from scratch and do things the way they believe should be done, but not everything works.
Yeah.
There should be more collaboration between landlords.
Yeah, why doesn't it work, Steve? Just give us some examples, particularly from a customer's point of view. Really interested in how our customers view the work that we do in their homes. So why isn't that message landing? What do you think we need to change about that messaging to get that better understood?
Again, that's a difficult question because everybody's different. To be honest, depends on the amount of work you're going to have done with your retrofit, because there are several ways to go around retrofitting a property, but not every property needs all those ways.
Yeah,
But to install a heat pump, for example, there is disruption
yeah,
and there's dust and there's noise, and it'll last about a week.
yeah,
And you're going to have people wandering in and out of your home, depending on the weather, dirty boots or things like that. They could be pulling up floorboards to lay pipes. They could be running pipes down the walls. They may be working in your loft area for a while. To get that work done, it's got to be done. People don't want that or not keen on it, put it that way, because I don't think the message of how much energy will be saved from these works has actually got across.
yeah,
You can't go to two people living in adjoining houses and say you're both going to save X amount of pounds. Every household is different.
yeah,
You may have one house that has got an elderly married couple in, no kids. Next door neighbour, maybe young married couple, got 2 or 3 kids, another one on the way. Their energy usage is going to be totally different.
yeah, sure.
Their priorities are going to be totally different. So you can't say to both of them, you're going to save this, because it ain't going to work. So the best thing is to personalise it to each individual property around the surveys that have been done, the measures that are going to need to be taken, and just give an approximation based on previous workings.
Yeah,
But to get those previous numbers, you need to do the work.
yeah, yeah,
So you've got to have, if you like, some guinea pigs at the start to go in, to agree to have the work done. Luckily, Yorkshire Housing have been lucky in having several projects, and now the numbers are coming through. And hopefully, I'm going up to one project next week to see how they got on and their initial findings, the data and everything. So hopefully, we'll have some form of measure that you can go to a comparable family and say, this family, before the works, were using this amount of energy. After the works, they're using that.
yeah.
You can aspire to those same saving.
Yeah. When I talk about it being a tough sell, in some cases, it's even harder because and I've heard you talk about this, in some cases, there aren't any savings for the customer living in that home, or they're very minimal. And it's also quite hard to track those given where energy prices have been over the last 2 years. But notwithstanding that, Yorkshire Housing has a wide variety of homes across God's own country, which is 100 miles north to south, 100 miles east to west. But certainly some of our rural properties, which aren't on the gas grid, when you take a tenancy with us, your first bill is £700 to fill the oil tank in the garden. And unlike with a car, you can't just say, well, only put half a tank in. It's either they come and fill it up or they don't come at all. And you either have hot heating and hot water or not. So certainly we've prioritised, for example, some of those homes. But when we've done the consultation with a number of customers, 2 things really seem to stop them from saying, yes, come and do the work. The first being that living in a low-carbon home is very different, as you know better than I do, compared to what 5 generations have been used to. I'll come back to that in a short while, actually, because I want to just unpick that a little bit more with you. But the second issue is around when we say, well, actually, we're going to remove that way of heating your home and put something different in, but actually the net savings will probably be maybe a couple of £100 at best a year in some cases. And again, we've struggled with that. So I'm really interested, because you've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands of customers. You have this debate and discussion on a daily basis. What do you think we could do as landlords that would help get that sell across? Because this isn't a new kitchen, a new bathroom. As you said, as you perfectly outlined, it's a week's worth of disruption in somebody's home for what they may view as very little gain. But we know the bigger picture is that, the 26 million homes in England emit more carbon than the 28 million cars on the road, but all the focus is on getting cars off the road or getting EVs in.
Yeah.
When I speak to other housing associations, every housing association struggles with getting this message right. So any tips or tricks, Steve, from your perspective that you could offer?
Again, That's a very, very difficult question to answer because everybody is different. I spoke to one chap who's due to have some work done, and straight away he said, "No, don't want it. Not interested. Don't want it.
Yeah.
You're going to have to crawl over my dead body to do the work and everything."
Right.
You're going to get some people that say, "Yeah, great, fantastic. I'll book the family in for a holiday for a couple of weeks. Get on with it."
Yeah.
You'll get others that will and ah. You need to use your customers.
Right.
Customers that may have been and ahhing at the beginning when you first send letters out, but have been won over by, again, talking to the people that know. Don't listen to the bloke in the pub.
Yeah.
Don't look at social media. I saw a program a couple of weeks ago, Smart Meters, Should I Have One? And this is the only time I'll agree with the media. At the end of the program, the presenter said, if you're not sure, ask an expert. Don't look at social media or talk to people you don't know.
Yeah.
Or speak to somebody who's had it done.
Yeah.
Now, that's the only time I'm going to agree with the media so far on energy efficiency. But I thought those words should be used by every single landlord and every single face-to-face operative in the country.
Yeah.
These are the horror stories. That is the only stories that people are listening to.
Yeah.
Because they're the only ones being given. So use your customers. If somebody's had the work done, get them to talk to their neighbours. But again, why not include the whole community at the start of the engagement?
Yeah.
You don't have to say you're going to get the work done to your property. But if you've got a development, for example, where I live, we got 22, 23 bungalows. If you're going to retrofit 10, why not include everybody that lives on that development right from the start? If you're only talking to the 10, after you've gone, the other 13 are going to go to those 10 and say, well, what's going on? And it's human nature. What those 10 tell the other 13 may not be complete or exactly as it was.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can start a rumour in a room of 20 people. Somebody starts a room, whispers it to the person next door. By the time it gets to the end, it's totally different. You need to, like you've done at Duggerby, you need to take the people from the manufacturers of the heat pumps. There were installers there was an underground insulation company there, and there was the contractor there. You need to get them in from the beginning, talk to the customers, let them explain the proper workings and how things are and the actual realities around what's involved and everything else. And don't leave out the bad bits.
Yeah.
Because again, if you only concentrate on the positives, at the end of the day, I mean, there's going to be noise and disruption. If you don't tell them that from the start, halfway through, they go and cook their meal and they find their plates are covered in dust. They're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
So come the customer satisfaction surveys, they're not going to be. So tell them right from the start. And if you need to decant them for whatever reason, for health reasons, disability reasons, whether it's physical or mental, whether it's a young single mother with a young child that needs to be decanted for, do that.
Yeah.
But use your customers. There's no better advert than somebody who's had the work done and is happy with it.
Okay. So I've got the 3 C's from this. Absolutely use your customers and the customer experience. Involve your contractors and be real about the experience and the process that's going to follow. But thirdly, and I think the message I'm hearing most consistently from you is the communication on this. There's almost need for a communication campaign in advance to get people bought into this and to do the sell really in terms of what it means for them. So right, so I've got the 3 C's, Steve. So I'm gonna take that away from that one. So let me switch over to when the work's been completed. We know that living in a low carbon home is very different from what the last 5 generations have probably been used to in terms of, gas boiler system, instant heat, instant hot water, the flick of a switch, thermostat, all that sort of stuff. And we're sat here right in the middle of the Climate Innovation District in Leeds, and we know that we're surrounded by low carbon homes. The way in which you live in a low carbon home is very, very different. It's arguably even more radically different than, say, making a switch from a petrol or diesel car to an electric vehicle. Any reflections or any thoughts from you on how we first of all prepare people for that? Because it's not just customers of social rented landlords, it's everybody. We're all going to have to make this change. But also, secondly, what should people expect? What are the key changes?
It's a completely different type of heat. I suppose you call it an ambient heat,
Right.
and it's everywhere. For example, you take a coal fire. Again, spoke to a lady up North Yorkshire. She has a coal fire, but that only heats one room.
Yeah.
And she used to forage around the local woods for wood to top up her fuel. But she's now quite happy to pay for the energy needed to use a heat pump because she'll be able to heat her whole house
Right.
and keep it at the same temperature or modify the temperature in rooms she's not, through the radiators. But it's an ambient heat. You won't feel the heat through the radiator and it won't be instant.
Right.
With a heat pump, or at the moment, you go home, or if you got one of those, is it Hive things on your phone or whatever?
Other products are available.
Yeah, and I don't get commission. But you can turn your heating on, and within 5 minutes, you can feel the heat on your radiator. With a heat pump, it don't work like that.
Yeah.
It needs to stay on all the time.
Yeah.
That will be set up by the engineers after they've installed it, and you shouldn't touch it. Leave it on, because if you turn it off, it will need a lot of energy to get it working.
Yeah, but that's really counterintuitive to what 5 generations
Yeah.
have been used to. It's we've all been told, haven't we? You put your boiler on and you switch it off as soon as you're warm enough and save heat. But this is completely different, isn't it, in terms of the approach to how you use the system?
Yeah, I know it's going to be difficult because even I do it. I go home, if I've got the heating on, I feel the radiators to make sure they're working properly. But with a heat pump, you won't feel that heat from the radiator. And there are other versions of heat as well, like you've got the infrared heaters.
Yeah, we've done some of that.
Yeah, you've got all these different types of heat. It's going to be different. It's almost like teaching somebody from medieval who's using a wood fire in the middle of their hut how to use gas-fired central heating.
That's an interesting analogy, actually. Yeah,
it's going to be totally different.
Yeah,
and it's got to be impressed on people. Don't be fooled by the fact you can't feel the heat from the radiator, because a lot of people think their heating's turned off, so they whack the temperature up.
Yeah.
And again, it's not going to work. All that's going to happen is your energy bill is going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
To balance that, with a heat pump, for every kilowatt hour it uses, it generates, depending on what sort of heat pump you got, between 3 and 4 kilowatt hours of hot water and heat. So just use figures. If your electricity price at the moment is 50p per kilowatt hour, you'll pay 50p, but you'll get up to £2 worth of energy to heat your water and heat your home.
Okay.
That's the way to use a heat pump. Don't rely on the temperature of the radiator and keep it on all the time.
Yeah.
Don't be fooled by it.
Yeah. And I think, obviously, I've been to quite a number of our homes after we've done work to decarbonise the homes. And we've done full house sort of retrofit works, which have been in excess of £100,000 per property, right through to maybe just an air source heat pump, or indeed in some cases just lots of additional insulation. But I've been to several homes now, and the same thing has happened where I've walked in and they've said, "Oh, apologies, but we're drying the clothes," and they've got the clothes laid out on the floor because there's a bit of underfloor heating as well as an air source heat pump. And for me, it was like, yeah, actually, why haven't we thought about this? Because 6 months ago they were drying the clothes on a radiator. They've now not got any radiators in that home. So why haven't we, for example, bought one of those, and you can see them in the catalogues, but one of those clothes dryers that you plug in so it heats the rails, but you can then, so you've got that, still got that way of dealing with your clothes. And I know there's a whole issue about damp mold condensation, and I know we'll probably end up having that conversation, but nevertheless, it's about, I suppose, it's weaning people off of behaviour or learnt behaviours from several generations. And I think in some cases, my concern has always been that we do this work and then we walk away without going back and helping people make that transition. I think we don't fully appreciate how much of a psychological shift it is for all of us to live in a very different way, to use our homes in a very different way from what we've traditionally been used to. Steve, can I take us probably on a bit of a different path? Because we've looked at how we do the sell to people who live in homes that need decarbonising, all of us in this room included. But I'm really interested in terms of some of the things that are going on or have been discussed at a national level around this. And I think, for me, if I'm being honest, my light bulb moment came when the Northern Housing Consortium Social Housing Tenants Climate Jury, God, that's a big mouthful, isn't it? But I know you were part of that jury.
Yep.
But when they published their report, it was 2 years ago now, that for me was suddenly the big light bulb wake up moment where I went, you know what, we need to look at this in a very different way. It is 2 years since that report was published, and I'm just interested in your view in terms of what's changed since then, if anything, and also has enough been done, in your opinion, as part of that journey and the recommendations that the climate jury made?
From a tenant's point of view, what tenants are after, I don't think has changed.
Right, and what are they after, Steve? What makes
Well,
you say
again,
that?
safe, healthy, energy efficient homes,
Right.
nice environment, not only indoors but out in their local, communities,
Yeah,
green spaces, wildflower gardens, allotments, anything that will help and reduce emissions and reduce energy, etc., etc. I think what's changed is there was an emphasis on the jury, there was an emphasis of getting the tenants and residents' point of view.
right.
That seems to have been gone. Now landlords seem to have looked at, I mean, it was very well received. The report had over 8,000 hits
Yeah,
in the first month, I believe. But it seems that they've taken that report, they've read the report, read the recommendations, and are doing things based on the recommendations rather than what their tenants actually want.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
right.
the tenants on the jury were from 5 housing associations,
Yeah,
from obviously Northern Housing Consortium from the north. But that doesn't mean to say that their priorities are the same as a tenant in the south or the
Right.
southwest or the east or Wales or Scotland or Timbuktu. Everybody, every area have got different, I wouldn't say necessarily priorities, but their issues may be different. They may want different things.
yeah.
So involve tenants more. I was hoping, and so were a few others on the jury, I was hoping that we would have seen more juries around the country.
Right.
Maybe a jury from the southwest,
Yeah.
another one from the southeast, one from London, one from the Midlands, or one East Midlands. Because, as I say, their local issues may be different to
Yeah.
what we in the NHC area. So I think the ultimate goal hasn't changed and the ultimate wants of the tenants haven't changed, but I don't think the sector as a whole has managed to grasp that. I mean, I've spoken to several tenants. There are some landlords who don't even have a retrofit policy, especially the smaller landlords, because they can't afford it.
Is it that they can't afford it, or is it that they're making different choices? Because, my argument on this would be we can't afford not to do this.
I completely agree.
I mean, I always say I'm a key holder, and my job is to leave Yorkshire Housing in a better position than I inherited it. But then my successor will aim to do the same, and we all have that role, and we're all custodians of this planet. And I think our job is to make sure that we've left it in a better position than we found it. And
Sure.
arguably, not wishing to cast dispersions on your age, Steve, but we're of a similar generation, and you could argue that our generation has been part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So we've got more of a duty and a responsibility. But I suppose what else needs to happen then? The jury and the report, as I say, was a light bulb moment for many of us. It's interesting, in terms of what you say about how many people have slavishly followed the recommendations rather than actually just sitting down with their customers and saying what would work locally for us. Is there anything else that you would like to have seen happen as a result of that report being published that perhaps has disappointed you that hasn't happened?
Yes, but it is starting to happen now. I'm seeing it happen now. Most of the recommendations were around collaboration and communication.
Right.
And recently, landlords are starting to work together, which is a good thing for many reasons. That's one of the things that we spoke about, which is keep things local, collaborate with neighbouring landlords, local councils, things like that. That's now coming through. And I think it all started off with collaborating over the Social Decarbonisation Fund. They start collaborating on getting their bids in, which again, I think is one reason why the smaller landlords are not putting too much priority on it, because it costs a fortune to get a bid in.
Yeah.
For every pound they spend on that, is a pound they can't spend on repairs or customer services or other policies. So, I mean, for a small landlord on a fixed income, it's very difficult.
Based on what you've just said, is that not why the collaboration is so important? Because they no longer have to incur those costs. They could, for example, do it under an umbrella of like the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership,
exactly.
us, the Mayor, or through Yorkshire Housing. We'd gladly support a bid that several of the smaller providers, because we get all the things you said. We get the economies of scale. So I think there is a point there about choices. On the subject of choices, we are in that 5-year cycle as we head into a general election. So my final question for you before we flip the mic is, as we head into that general election period, what would be your ask of all the political parties? What would you like to see front and centre on their manifesto offer to you?
Can I be controversial here?
Yeah, well, this podcast aims to be controversial. That's why we get so many lovely listeners. So feel free.
I would like to see the parties stand back from climate change, retrofit, net zero, whatever you want to call it. I would like to see regional commissions set up, which are non-political, which would include local businessmen, local manufacturers, local suppliers, financiers, planners, green skills trainers, and residents, because they know what their priorities are in those areas. This is not a 5-year plan. This is not a one government term plan. This is now a 26-year plan. And we need consistency, continuity, and longevity. But last year, Rishi Sunak drastically cut back on his green commitments. And this year, we've had the Labour. On the one hand, they're saying we'll commit so many billions to it. Now they're stepping back from it. This is not good for the residents to make up their mind whether to have retrofit done or not.
You're asking me to take the politics
completely
out of the decarbonisation process and
completely.
Right.
Leave it to the people that know what they're talking about.
Okay. Great. Oh, there you go. So if you're pulling together that manifesto, take heed of Steve's words, Steve's wise words. So one of the new features for season 3, Steve, and it's always one where I get slightly nervous. We've introduced something called Flip the Mic, which gives our guests the opportunity to ask me the things that they might want to know. So it is with a significant amount of worry that I flip the mic and say, over to you, Steve, to ask the questions.
Right. Yorkshire Housing have about 20,000 homes.
Yep.
And many need some form of retrofit, whether it's just insulation or where it's a full, top to tail. You've got limited income from rents, which is set by the government.
Yep.
Increases to the rents are set by the government as well, CPI plus 1% maximum.
Yep.
At a conservative estimate of 15 grand a property, that's going to cost you £300 million over the next 25 years.
Yep.
Where will the money come from? Can Yorkshire Housing afford it? And more importantly, will it have any effect on the other services that are provided, like money coaches, repairs, ASB?
Yeah, so the figure's actually higher than that. So if you take the Savills' recent estimate of £22,000 per property, which we think is well lower than the real cost.
I was trying not to frighten the audience.
But it's actually 400 million.
Yeah.
So the amount that we've assumed in our 30-year business plan is £400 million of investment. Can we afford it? I think it goes back to the comment I made before about can we afford not to. You look at the benefits of decarbonising our home. It's not just, of course, the main priority is to reduce the carbon footprint of those homes. And here at Yorkshire Housing, we strive to be a low-carbon business. But also the added insulation, the more cost-effective way of heating and living in that home reduces the cost of living in that home for those customers. And as you said, earlier in this discussion, a number of our customers really can't think about the climate crisis in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. They're struggling to get through each day during this cost of living crisis. So for me, this is also about how we can help reduce the cost to live in our homes and to give our customers a better quality of life so that they've got more money in their pocket so that they can do other things rather than just pay heating bills. My ask in all of this is that use the words around consistency and continuity. I think the stop-start process that we have at the moment of funding just leads to spikes in costs. So, for example, which we really welcome, but Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, that has some very tight timescales attached to it. The suppliers, there's only a finite number of products, so the supply chain increases their prices because the demand goes up, but also there's a finite amount of skills to fit these products. So the labour market and the labour costs go up. So all that happens with this stop-start funding approach is that you get these huge spikes in cost. So actually, we're delivering less for more spend. My big ask would be Yorkshire Housing is absolutely committed, and we have locked into our business plan that £400 million worth of investment in our homes over the next 30 years. But to help us achieve that, we need a national strategy which gives the consistency and continuity that you talked about, Steve, so that we take away those spikes in the cost, but also we give, as you said before, supply chain manufacturers the confidence to invest in products. Many of these products at the moment are offshore and are imported in. And interestingly, during the first Social Housing Decarb Fund project, some of our works were delayed because some of our products were on a container ship that was 3 ships behind the one that got stuck in the Suez Canal. And so it's those things about supply chain. My big passion on this is how we could also use this to develop a new workforce, a new green skilled workforce. And within that, providing and offering opportunities to a large number of our customers to be part of that new workforce. So for me, I'm absolutely committed to this, regardless of what happens in terms of national policy. For all the reasons I've said, we absolutely believe that this is the right thing to do, and we stick by our values on this.
Very succinct answer. Thank you.
My producer kills me if I'm not succinct.
How important is it to you and Yorkshire to hear the views and comments of your tenants and have them ask questions around retrofit? And what are you doing to get tenants involved?
It's a great question. And I think it goes back to your comment really before about the fact that until quite recently, the approach by many landlords, and ourselves included in that, has been that we'll get consultants in, we'll design a programme, and we'll do what we think's best. And actually, I think, as I mentioned before, this Social Housing Tenants Climate Jury Report was the light bulb moment for me. That's when our approach switched. The light bulb that went off was, oh my goodness me, this is going to be such a difficult sell. This is not new windows, new bathrooms. This is not offering shiny improvements that our customers want. This is a hard sell in many cases. So the only way to do that, in my book, was to sit down with customers face to face in a very open and honest way, a very Yorkshire way of doing things, and telling it how it is, but also, as you quite rightly said before, bringing in other customers, bringing in people from their local community who they know and trust. People like you, Steve. People are much more trusting of you than they are of me. And I think it's about recognising the importance of actually customers telling their own story and sharing their own journey to prevent and offset some of the dafter rumours that do. I've not heard the one about the dog freezing if it walks past an air source heat pump. So that's a new one on me. But you're right, there's a lot of misinformation on this, and anybody who looks at social media would instantly be put off. So our customers are right at the heart of this. One, because they help us do the sell, but secondly, it helps us fine-tune and change the programme so that we actually get it right. Because at the end of the day, we are in people's homes. Yep. This isn't units, it's not houses. We are doing this work in people's homes. And that is the key thing that we need to understand, appreciate, and make sure that we are hugely respectful of in terms of design and deliver the programme, but then also support those customers to living in a low-carbon home, which, as we've talked about before, is very different. So Steve, thanks for that. It's my turn to then go to the quick fire round as we come to the end of this. So my quick fire questions to you. What's the one thing that we could all do that would take us on a bit of a journey to reducing our carbon footprint?
Become carbon literate.
Brilliant, great. And secondly, you go home tonight and all the main world leaders come and join you for tea. What one thing would you tell them or ask them?
Get out of retrofit and leave it to your local regional tenants to do what's best for them. After all, as you said, it's their homes. But we must also not forget we're talking about social housing and residents and things like that, there is a commercial element on top, which has got to be taken into account in the final decisions, whatever anybody says.
Okay, great. Sadly, and I can't believe time's gone so quickly, but it is time to close the door on this episode of Raising the Roof. So a massive thank you to you, Steve, for your insight and your very challenging questions as well. My brain matter's definitely churning at the moment. And a huge thank you to all of you for listening and staying with us to this point in the podcast. One final ask from me. Please hit the subscribe button from wherever you get your podcasts, as we have a truly amazing lineup for season 3. And by doing so, you can also catch up on any of the episodes from our 2 previous seasons. From me, that's a wrap. Thanks very much for listening, and look forward to catching up with you very soon.